Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. This is a crazy, crazy story to start with, and I can't even believe it's one that we're going to talk about. But removing the blocking feature from this very app that we are on, is this real? Is this really happening? And what does this mean for spaces and the security of holding a space, but also having the option to perhaps block someone from that space if you need to?
Yeah, this was just some random tweet from Elon that came out of nowhere. I don't think anybody was expecting this, but last week he did a tweet saying block is going to be deleted as a feature except for DMs. So there was a lot of conversation. I'm sure some of you all have seen the conversation going on. You probably jumped in and chimed in on some of these tweets. But my first reaction was, the block feature is kind of important. There are times where it's really needed, especially if you have somebody harassing you, you've got some spammers, some trolls, and this will affect spaces if it goes away because, right, like let's say you have somebody that's harassed you to no end, and the only way to get them to stop is to block them. Because when you block an account, it's like you don't exist anymore. You don't exist, they don't exist. They don't see you, you don't see them, unless they log out and go into a different account, and then of course they can see you again. But usually, and from what I've heard a lot of people say, with this very large discussion that has gone on about this, a lot of people say the block feature works well enough that usually people that are harassing them will leave them alone once they're blocked.
That's a lot of effort to go to, isn't it? I mean, you've got to be like super troll to want to go around and do that. I mean, who knows where people's heads are at sometimes. But I honestly thought that this was like a joke or clickbait. I was like, oh yeah, this is just to kick up a dust storm, get everybody hyped up, and that could never happen. But I don't know.
He's pretty serious about it.
Tweeting about it, posting about it himself, and you just think, oh, really? Really?
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting. People that really pay attention to him very quickly realized when he tweeted that out or posted it out, he was in Japan, live streaming on stage with Grimes, who I think he has a child with, right? I think it's his ex that he has a child with. It's a musician, right? He's on stage live streaming her performance. And then in the middle of that, he does this tweet. So a lot of people thought, okay, he didn't mean this, but he is pretty serious about it. Apparently, he's also got the CEO on board talking about it. And they're making it like, we're going to take the mute feature and make it better. So I don't know. I'm still a little concerned because if you block someone and let's think about this for a moment. If you're using spaces like we do, and let's say you've had somebody harass you or troll you or whatever, and you block them, it's nice to know they can't come into your space. Because, I mean, while it's public, it's still kind of intimate, right? And you would certainly not want someone who's harassed you in the past to show up. So how is that going to be affected if they really do go through with this? What are we going to have to worry about people that we're trying to get away from that have bothered us in the past that the block feature worked? So I don't know if that's been thought through over at X.
Yeah, I mean, although, as the host, it's down to you to check out who you're giving the mic to and all of those kind of things. As you say, if someone's really hell-bent on trolling you or following you about or, making your life a misery for whatever reason, you might not even realise that that's who it is behind the profile. It's worrying that they're even considering it and that it's even a topic of conversation. As I say, it really took me aback that it was something that we might even discuss. But yeah, I think it will make a difference to spaces. It's good to have it there, right? Because you want to be in control, not only for you personally, but I also didn't want that impacting on the spaces that I host and coming into the content that I was creating by using spaces. So I think there's an awful lot to it that needs to be really carefully thought through. And I just really hope it's not one of these things that they just go, right, that's it, across the board. Let's just turn that off today. Because you know what he's like. It'll be, oh, yeah, let's do that on Tuesday because we're not doing anything else. I really
right.
hope that isn't how it goes.
Well, we'll wait and see, but it was the big news last week since we were all gathered here last. So we'll keep you all posted as this progresses. So interesting, speaking of X, one of their employees, Dan, who is very active in Spaces. I see him all over the place. He did a tweet or post. It's so hard to remember to say the new terminology. Dan says, Spaces on X is pretty much a phone call that anyone in the world can listen to in on from the upstairs telephone. It's like, that's an interesting way of talking about Spaces. So
it is. And is it though? Is it just a phone call anyone in the world can drop into? Because I saw that, like Michael, who's a regular here on All Things Audio and usually in the space, he sort of responded to it and said, kind of, is it a phone call? Kind of, but not really. He says, I call social audio plus, with pinned items, chat, reactions. There's a lot more to it that you couldn't do in a phone call. Although I get what he's saying about, I guess, you used to be able to, I'd lift the receiver upstairs to listen in on the phone call, perhaps that was going on, between my sister and her friend or whatever, just to annoy them. And I guess that's what he's saying, when you're a listener in a space, you're sort of dropping in that sort of eavesdropping capacity. But you're very visible, to be fair, like your face or your profile picture at least is there. It's not quite the sort of hidden version of it. So yeah, interesting though. Like, is it just a global phone call or is it a bit more than that?
It is so much more than that. That's why we love Spaces so much. Social audio is amazing. There's so much you can do with that. It's such a great way to bring people together, so much more than a phone call. So I just love how immersed we are in it. I love that we dedicate this space every week to discussing what's new, what's going on in the world of social audio. There's always something for us to be talking about.
Always. And now we're going to be talking about repurposing our spaces because, if we're going to take the time to plan and to host and to, put this audio out there and put it all together, we want to make sure we make the most of it, right? And Madeline, I know you spent quite a lot of time recently using Zealous, and we've spoken about them a lot before, but there's lots going on, isn't there? And I can see Gregarious is in the wings.
Yeah. So, you and I love repurposing content, and here we are in Spaces every week. And you and I have each been testing out some of the various tools that are out there that allow us to repurpose our content from Spaces. And we've been both experimenting with Zealous quite a bit. We've talked about Zealous here a lot in the time we've gotten to know them. And we've had Gregarious from Zealous come to speak with us from time to time. And they're always doing really great things with this tool. And I want to talk about it a little bit today because they have been making a lot of updates to it. And I cannot get over how awesome this tool has really become, especially with some of these features that have just been getting upgraded. And I've just been spending a lot of time on it. I know you have as well, Suze. But I just wanted to just talk real quick about this because not only can you use this if you're hosting or co-hosting, speaking in Spaces, but if you have a podcast, you can also utilize your audio from podcasts into this tool for some of your repurposing. And that's not all. Let's say you're using Spaces, you're hosting, you're co-hosting, and you decide, I would love to turn this into a podcast. They have it set up so that it can set up an RSS feed for you and have this as a podcast over in Apple, over in Spotify, like the whole thing without having to go get a podcast hosting company involved. Usually you have to have a host company. And like, that's what I normally do with my podcast. And it's like a whole separate thing you have to do. But they've incorporated everything into this. So I'm so impressed, Suze, that I can use this not only for all the various spaces that I host. Right now I'm doing 4 every single week, the one here with you and 3 others. And I'm launching a new podcast. there is so much use for tools like this if you're utilizing audio. So what has been your experience with Zealous? Because I know you've been playing with it as well.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed making the audiograms with Zealous, just because you can do that straight from the transcript. So effectively, when I go in there, I can see the spaces that I've hosted, the spaces I've been involved in, and I can choose to transcribe one. It will then do that for me. It takes a little while, but I then get my transcript, and I can highlight sections of that, and it'll actually clip that out. And then not only is it creating it in the customized colors and different things that I want, so that it's in our All Things Audio purple and all of that kind of thing, but I get lots of different variants of it. So it might be the same clip that I'm sending out, but it will look different on the feed, or I can do it in a different shape for a different platform. And it's just really easy to do it all in one place. I mean, I love audiograms in general, and I do have favored tools when I'm creating audiograms for podcasts and uploading, the little audio files and things. But for me, for spaces and for repurposing this stuff, I need it to be pretty quick. And so anything that's automating that process for me is a total bonus, and I'm definitely going to jump in there and use it. But to then give me variants on that content as well is really useful, because you do have to push these things out, more than once to get people's attention. And certainly what I found the week that I did a whole tranche of them. I think it was around our 100th episode. The week that we did that, I had so many great conversations with people as well. And they were the conversation starters because people had noticed them in the feed and listened to the audio. And it also meant that I could showcase the people that had come up and spoken to us in our space. We're always grateful to hear from people, but it meant that I could put their ideas out into the world a little bit further in a different way. And it did start further conversations. So yeah, it's definitely kind of a one-stop shop, if you like, and that's totally what I need when I'm creating the content around this space. So yeah, really good.
It really is. And I have in the nest here an audiogram I had created from last week's space. It was so quick and easy to do. And there's just so much control you have over editing exactly what you're putting together. And so I just did this real quick, you last week talking about podcasting. It's like a very short 20-second clip, and it looks really nice. And this is just a great way to take some of this great audio from your spaces or from a podcast and get it out there into your various social media feeds. And I'm glad that Gregarious made it over from Zealous, because I would love to hear a little bit more about this, especially because they are going to be retiring one of their plans, but you still have time to take advantage of it, which I think is really cool the way they're offering that. Because many times with these tools, I love the free trial. I want to try it. I want to see what all I can do first. I'm sure many of you feel the same way. We always want to try before we buy to see, is this something I would use that I would get a lot out of? And I was just surprised at how quickly I just saw so much value from these features, and even more so with these more recent updates they've made. It just seems like it's getting better and better. So Gregarious, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, and always happy to hear folks are getting value out of the product.
Yeah, it's working really great. I mean, I've always liked using it, but I feel like I'm able to do the things I want to do even faster, like with just some of the more recent changes in there.
That's our goal. We're constantly looking for friction that we can remove, and unfortunately, sometimes we're the ones who create the friction. So we do our best to refactor the tool as we can to sort of remove more and more of whatever's getting in the way in your workflow with Zealous as well.
One of the features I forgot to mention, and I think is so important that you guys offer, is the ability to have a backup of your spaces. It's not easy having access to your previous spaces. Sure, they're still hosted on Twitter, on X here. It's not easy to go download the MP3. They make it very, very difficult, especially if you have an older account like mine with a whole lot of content for the last, 14 years. For my Madeline Sklar profile, I can't even get it. It doesn't even work. So it's so incredibly useless for me to try to use them to get the downloadable files. But with Zealous, you guys offer the ability to have those backups so you can easily go download the MP3. I'm sure that's been something you've gotten great feedback from.
Yeah, I would say, early on, that was the original use case back, for folks who remember way back, they used to delete spaces after 30 days. And so that was like one of the first features we had, was just like making sure you had a place that they didn't get deleted. Right. And yeah, I have the same problem, Madeline. I've been on Twitter since like 2006 or something. And so it takes a very long time, and it certainly doesn't allow you to have or produce timely content if you're trying to do so, right? Like it just gets in the way, having to do the traditional archive pathway.
I'd love to hear more about creating the RSS feed from it. How simple is that to do, Gregarious? Because obviously you've got your Spaces feed, which is, if you think about it, just your archive, as we've said. But what's the process then to push that out so that it's a podcast?
Yeah, great question. We launched this feature, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and I kicked myself because folks have been asking for it. Like I even had the idea for it like more than a year ago. We just never got around to doing it. But one of the things that Zealous does is it allows you to not just have the backup, but it allows you to publish basically a playlist to your audience. So you can actually publish all of your transcripts, all the transcripts that you choose, as well as the recordings, in a playable format, like that you can then like point people at. So, all of you have already basically like a live site and Zealous filters. You can filter your inbound Twitter spaces, et cetera. You can filter even your podcasts and break them up into different channels if you want. But to make an RSS feed is very simple. There's a section on your navigation on the left called the site. And you basically have channels, and each channel you have the option of putting recordings into those channels, either automatically with filtering or manually just by moving it in when you're ready for it to be there. And when you put a recording into that channel, it basically becomes an episode. All right. To set up a podcast itself, all you do is go to the settings for that channel, and every channel has its own feed. So, for example, ages ago when I did my first podcast back in 2004, I used to actually run it in multiple cities around multiple topics. I actually had like a feed per city. We had a feed for the whole show, et cetera. So if you wanted to like break up content and sort it, you can do that. So every channel could be like subscribable on its own if you wanted. But when you go to the settings for that channel, there's a tab there for podcast. And it literally is the exact same form that Apple has. And you fill out all the details, and this will then insert your email address and all the other information, the categories, et cetera, into that RSS feed for you. And on the right-hand side of that page are 3 links to submit it to Google, to Apple, and to Spotify. And you literally, like in hours, you can have it done. It really, from us, it's quick. It's the approval process on the other side that usually takes more time. There is a shortcut, though, that you can use in Spaces, and a lot of folks miss this. As the host or co-host, if you hit 100, it'll automatically bookmark that moment.
Isn't that a great way of, you're creating the content in the moment then as you go. You're like literally dropping the marker to say, right, this is the bit that I want. And so it's when you hit the 100, right?
That's right. And so
amazing.
The summary tab of your every recording, it starts with our AI recommendation. So our AI is pulling out interesting moments, and it gives you a list of them and quotes, and you can click on it quickly to basically be at an audiogram in seconds. But there's a drop down there, and that drop down says AI highlights. But if you click on the second option, I believe it's 100 highlights. And so it'll show you a list of all the hundreds that you or your co-host, like the time around the time frame that you highlighted. We try to be as precise as possible, but it's not quite perfect. There's some lag in the recording. There's also sometimes some lag in when the data gets recorded, or when you hit the button. So, but you get, we made it very easy for you to like select the right text. But this will tune you into that part of time automatically. Yeah,
I mean, if you've got an hour-long space, then even knowing within 10 seconds where it is that you're looking for has got to be good, right? So, and I'm sure it's more accurate than that even. So it's, what a great little feature and a great idea.
Yeah, that's super smart. Now, your lowest paid plan is $10 a month, and I have the tweet up in the nest here that says that you guys are going to be retiring that plan on September 1st, but if people still want to sign up for it between now and then, they can stay at that package. I think that's really awesome of you guys to offer that.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mentioned actually, I think in our town hall, maybe like even at the beginning of the month. But yeah, it's not that we don't like love supporting creators and making the product as accessible as possible. But I think we're also, folks, I think often think like maybe we're like a large company. There's only two of us in Zealous, right? And what we've been finding is that the actual level of features that most people need actually just requires us to do a bunch more computing, right? And so as we employ more AI into the platform, we didn't want to start like having like all these weird, like, oh, this plan doesn't have this. And like, so we're getting rid of that $10 plan so we can actually support more pre-processing and other capabilities for you kind of built into the transcription time that's happening.
And that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah. If you sign up today, even if you're on a trial, it doesn't matter if you've converted, that plan will be available until September 1st. So actually today is like literally 7 days. I think we have a 7-day trial. So if you sign up today, you have that $10 plan basically forever. We won't take it away, but if you choose to upgrade or you cancel at any point, then obviously that would the plan will go away.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend it if our listeners, whether you podcast, whether you do spaces, if you're trying to repurpose audio. Well, there's so much. I mean, it's not even just repurposing. Having the ability to get the transcript, that alone is very valuable. I mean, I remember back in the day having to use rev.com, and that wasn't cheap just to get a transcript of your audio, like with a podcast. I know people, that have used it for spaces, or they use other third-party tools that incorporate AI to get the transcript, and they all cost money. I mean, and it's usually just something people have just to get, like, pay a service just to get a transcript. I love that you've incorporated so many different aspects of social audio and podcasting as an all-in-one. So I just love that there's just so many features, and that's what has really attracted me to using Zealous, is that I like that it's an all-in-one. I have everything I need there. And I appreciate that this whole $10 a month thing. I love when a company lets people know that, hey, we're going to be making some changes to our pricing plans, but we'll keep, even though we're retiring this one, we're going to give you a period of time that you could still sign up for it. So if you're looking, you can't afford a whole lot, but you want to be able to use some of these services, then we're going to let you have it at that cost. And I really appreciate when a company does that, because in this day and age, we don't see that a whole lot. It's usually just all of a sudden there's new pricing with no warning. So thank you for doing that.
Totally. And like I said, it's Spaces hosts have been like, are some of our earliest adopters, some of our best users. We want to make sure, a lot of folks sometimes are sitting on the fence that are like, oh yeah, I'll sign up for it someday. And we just want to make sure that if that was the set of features that were good for you and you wanted to use them, that you had the chance to get in. We think it's still a great deal at $25 a month, honestly. But I think it's great if you can get in at 10 and that's going to work for you, then awesome. Like, we're happy to have you, and the reason I put that thread together actually was because I think I think you all know from experimenting, there's a ton of features in there. And a lot of times people are like, wait, it does that, or it does this. And I just went through all the things that people have written me about and said like, oh, I love that you do this, or I love that you do that, and sort of put them out there, and I think like Zealous dries up probably about like $150 in tools, a month, right? Like, I know for my own workflow in the past, that was how much I would be spending on basically this similar set of tools. So we do a lot for you, hopefully for a good value. And, I think we don't have any of the weird limits either, right? Like, there's no, like, you can only have an hour-long file, or, all these other things, or X number of files. We don't do any of those things in our plans. And so we don't charge for clips, right? We don't charge for hosting, right? Like, all that's built in, right? And you get that basically, at $10.
That is awesome. Well, I think you've done a great job with this tool, and I think it's so important listening to the feedback. And one of the things I love so much about various tools that I use a lot in my business is when it is typically a small business and they listen to the customers, to the users, and take that feedback to keep making it better and better. So those are the kind of tools that I always like using and recommending. So I just really appreciate all that you're doing to just make our lives easier as creators, which is really bottom line what Zealous does.
There's a lot coming, by the way, and I will tell you this, just as a little sneak preview, we will be in the App Store like early next year.
Ooh, exciting.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you for joining us and sharing all this with us.
So, from Spaces repurposing over to other apps using audio, Madeline. We spoke last week about Threads working on voice posts, which was something that we come across on Alessandro Paluzzi's feed. He's reverse engineering, finding things that are not quite out there yet, not really been rolled out, but are perhaps being developed and worked on behind the scenes. Last week, we discussed it a little bit, whether or not, even if Threads did add voice posts, would we spend more time over there? Because we were both quite honest and said, yeah, we spent some time there. We haven't spent some time there very recently. This edition, this week from Alessandro, says that they are still working on voice posts and that these voice posts over on Threads could have a maximum duration of 10 seconds. And then in brackets, he's put for now. Now, I'm quite intrigued by this. I'm not quite sure what we might get out of a 10-second voice post. I mean, what do you think, Madeline?
That's exactly what I was thinking. It sounds like a great idea to have voice posts over there. And I think that will bring people back over. Maybe not a ton, but some. It would make me want to go back over there. I have not been over there in a long time. But 10 seconds, it's like, well, what would we say in 10 seconds? That would be like, oh, wow, I want to go over there and use this feature all the time. So I don't know. I'm not too excited about it. If it was at least a minute, that would be different. But 10 seconds is not much time.
Thinking about Twitter, we enjoyed the limitation of 140 characters, right? And then when they said they were going to give us more, a lot of us, me included, were like, oh, I really liked it being micro-blogging. And it was like you had to make it short. Maybe there's that kind of idea behind it. I don't know. I'm not sure. 10 seconds is just, it doesn't sound enticing. So I don't know about that. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll keep reporting back as we learn more. It's hard to tell from these screenshots what exactly we're getting here because they're not very forthcoming. No, and they are all kind of under wraps, if you like. So they're all things that may or may not appear in future that might be developed. They might be spending time and money and effort on it, or it might be dropped, or we might never see it at all, or it might be in 3 years' time. We just can't tell, or it might be next week. I mean, who knows? But I guess ever since Threads came out, the question has sort of hung about in that a lot of the social media platforms now have an audio element to them. And would Threads chase after that, especially considering that Facebook had really withdrawn from the audio side of things? So was this going to be sort of Meta's play for audio, if you like? And in fact, our next story that we're going to talk about is about Instagram. So again, like Meta, they're not really taking themselves out of the audio game. I think they're trying to test the waters in different places. So this next story is about Instagram and audio clips for notes. Now, if you don't know, notes are basically the bubbles that appear when you're in your DMs at the top. People can now add like a status or whatever as a note, and that appears almost like a story or an old style fleet over here in that top bar, and you can add whatever you want to say in limited characters as a note. Now, a little while ago, they allowed you to add a 30-second clip, I think, of music. So you could then choose a piece of music that you might want people to listen to, reflecting your mood, going with your note, whatever. And now they're saying that social media today have said that they're testing audio clips for notes. So you'll be able to attach something that you speak and record into your phone to that little bubble that appears in your DMs. What do you think of this one?
It sounds interesting for sure. I don't use Instagram a whole lot anymore. So I like that they are testing some audio use in the DMs. I think that's a great idea. I would definitely love to play around with it. That might get me to use Instagram more. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all, but it's still kind of hard for me to tell since I haven't really used this notes feature. I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not quite sure in looking at these screenshots what exactly we're doing here with the audio clips in there. And since it's only being tested, it's probably just a small group that have access right now.
I took a look earlier today and I've got notes. A lot of people still don't even have the ability to add a text note, let alone the music. I do have the ability to do that, but I can't record my own audio clip yet. So I think you're right. I think it is this kind of private beta, whatever. It's not rolled out to everybody as yet. interesting, though, that Alessandro Pelusi, again, going back to him, has uncovered the fact that Instagram looked to be working on the ability to reply to these notes with a voice message already. So in terms of what we were talking about a minute ago about threads, essentially that's what's potentially being looked at over here for Instagram. So this is where I say, like, Meta's clearly thinking about how can we get people talking to one another using audio on these platforms. What's going to be the best way to do this? And actually, which of these platforms is the best to carry that forward? Is it Instagram? Is it Threads? Is it both of them? They've clearly kicked Facebook out of line for it. They very much said that they're not going to be focusing on audio over there, and I've not seen any movement to suggest otherwise in a good year or so. But yeah, the idea that you might be able to then reply to this little voice note is quite cute. And I was thinking, well, essentially that voice note that you put up there is available to anyone who is following you, so that they can then see that. It will pop up in their DMs as a little voice note to everybody and will be public. I'm assuming, because we don't have an awful lot of information about it, that if you were to reply to that note, that would then become a private response. Or does it become a public response and everybody can hear what someone's responded to what you said? So that's quite an interesting idea. Like, what's the thinking behind that? Like a kind of asynchronous conversation that will be public, or an asynchronous conversation that takes it into the DMs and becomes like a private voice message. So yeah, they're clearly thinking through something over there, and there's not a great deal of information about it, but I do love to wonder what they might be doing.
It could very much end up being like what we're able to do over here on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it today, in the DMs, where we can do voice messages, which is an excellent feature. There are many times where it's just so much easier to tap the button and just talk and do your message that way instead of typing. Plus, I feel like with audio, you can say so much more in that than trying to just type it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I love a little voice message. I use them quite a lot on WhatsApp. I haven't used them quite so much over here on Twitter, probably because I just don't think of it, to be honest. It's definitely a feature that is being looked at anyway, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes and what happens to it, if anything does.
And the last item we have is some podcasting news. For any of the podcasters out there, big announcement this week came from Apple. They have launched a new subscription analytics dashboard over in Apple Podcast Connect. Apple Podcast Connect is a great place to go just to get some analytics on your podcast. But for those that are actually using the subscription model for their podcast, I don't, but I know it's a very popular feature that a lot of podcasters are using. They have come up with so much more of the analytics for that. And I thought that was really smart of them to do, where you can actually view your subscription rates, the proceeds, just so much more. As a creator, you can see, like how many people are doing a free trial. If you're offering a free trial, how many paid subscriptions and people doing the trial to subscription with the conversion rate. So I think that was really smart that they're adding. Since I'm not using the subscription feature there, I didn't even realize they were not offering the analytics for that. So that was kind of news to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. I think both this and the breaking news from earlier that Spotify's launching a kind of enhanced dashboard as well, where you can customize your show pages, all kinds of different things that they're rolling out. I think both of these are off the back of the fact that podcast movement is going on at the moment over in Denver. So I think this announcement on Monday, and then the one that was made by Spotify earlier today, I think that was actually made at podcast movement. So it's kind of not surprising that they both come out at the same time. It's interesting to see that Apple is launching this dashboard for those people who have got those subscription, they're pushing out episodes that people are subscribing for. And so if you're doing that, you can get this analytics dashboard and look at it. Anyone who's just a general standard Apple Podcast user who goes into Apple Podcast Connect will know that actually the stats that you get as a standard user are just woeful. So I'm guessing that shouting about this dashboard is more about getting more people to make subscription content, which will obviously benefit them as a company. And they're sort of saying, if you want all the stats, well, make us some money and we'll give you what you want. So I found that quite interesting, but I'm sure there's lots more to come podcasting wise out of Podcast Movement. I took a quick look yesterday at the hashtag. There seemed to be lots of different talks and things going on that I would have loved to have attended. The Spotify stuff that they're putting out there does look really cool. You're going to be able to customize those show pages. As I said, you're going to be able to curate your preview for their sort of TikTok style feed that they've got over there. So you'll actually be able to suggest what it is that you want people to see when they're in that feed. And that feed was really the reason why lots of people felt like they needed to add video to their podcast. I mean, even prior to kind of YouTube saying that they were coming on board with podcasting, when Spotify kind of created this podcast feed and it was all very visual, lots of people thought they might need to create video for it. Now you can really curate and work out what it is that people are going to see in that preview space. They're also giving you a best place to start in your podcast. So you'll be able to actually put the start point, which reminds me of Spaces, because like we do that here on Spaces, and we suggest that people do that when you finish your space, that you scroll back and add your start point where your content actually starts. So, anyone listening back to this from today, hopefully won't hear all the waffle about us having issues at the beginning about recording and, blank screens and all the rest of it. We will start right where the content starts so that people get into the meat of what they're there to hear. And lots of different features and things that they're really offering at the moment.
I do have a question for Gregarious from Zealous, since he's still here with us. In your thread this week with all, talking about all these great features, you had this one that I haven't tried yet, talking about video subtitles and captions. So we're able to take a video and use that and kind of repurpose that. We can use TikToks, Reels, and things like that, or just specifically, I guess, Shorts.
Yeah, actually, I was going to I backed up just because I am at Podcast Movement.
Amazing.
Well, you should tell us about it.
Tell us more.
Did not realize you were there.
I forgot to mention, I live 15 minutes from like the location. So like it was a very easy layup. But yeah, no, it's been an interesting event for sure. Just for your question about the video. Yeah, you can take a video just as easily as we take an audio file. You can still create audiograms that extract only the audio. But if you want to use the video, we will clip it. When you generate clips from a video, even though you don't see the video, we're actually clipping the video file for you. And yes, we will burn the subtitles onto the video for you, or we have like a few templates that show up when it's a video source as opposed to an audio source. So you can get TikTok style, or you can get like just caption style.
That is so cool. I'm going to definitely have to play around with that feature. Well, tell us about Podcast Movement.
It's interesting. It's been it started on Monday, it goes into tomorrow. The format's been I'm not in love with it. All the stages are in the same room. So it's like all in the expo hall, and around the edges are all the stages. So it's a very loud environment to be in. But yeah, I think, I would say some of the interesting things or trends, lots of AI this time around. Podcast Movement, from what, this is my first year going, but, from talking to folks, this seems to be more of the industry sort of oriented event. So a lot more of the platforms are there, like Patreon is there, and, Spotify, iHeartMedia, like, Simplecast, Descript, et cetera, right? So a lot of platforms are there. A lot of people rolling out or introducing or talking about AI. The topics are on a variety of different tracks, everything from like technical tooling to AI talks to a lot of things about programmatic this year. And so, how podcasters start to leverage or integrate programmatic into their conversation or their feeds as well. Decent amount of monetization tools. So everything from like getting paid to speak to merch and other things like that. So a lot of interesting variety. I think most of the things you probably would expect, though, right? For the space. So I think there's been an interesting, it's an interesting array of folks. I will say though, it's been a wonderful event for meeting people. So it's just been great because very approachable, lots of different people, lots of different sects, lots of different different kinds of content being created. It does the content of the show itself doesn't seem to lean particularly towards like any specific type of creator. My favorite thing that I've seen so far is a new hardware device, actually, from a company called No Mono. And it's amazing. I remember the old Apple Pod like thing, the computer thing. It's like a very small case. It's not cheap. It's $2,500, but it basically has in it like a base, like a base cube. I think they call it the space capsule. That actually records like ambient sound and all the room tone and everything else for you. And then it actually in the case is 4 wireless mics. You can literally lav up everybody right there. It records everything. It tracks, uses a ton of AI to do like denoising, de-essing, etc. In the cloud for you. But the really sweet thing about this thing is that it works amazingly well no matter where it is. It can remove like they did recordings there, and it produces fully spatialized audio that like is like Adobe Atmos compatible. So if you work like in corporate environments or you have to do this stuff a lot on the go, it's just a tremendous device. I'm looking forward to like introducing some of our customers to some of that technology. But yeah, I think those are my quick insights. I'll probably have more. Happy to come back next week and we chat further after I had some more time to reflect on it. But I think a good event, from what I understand, is maybe a little smaller than it was in the past. But also the next one, Festival, is the next one coming up, and that's in January. So we're not far off from. I was having lunch with one of the Podfest people yesterday. So looks like an interesting event for sure. And there's hundreds of people there. Without a doubt. So it's definitely not a small.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
No, amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm glad you
mentioned it. Quick question
there.
before we wrap up. I just checked my DMs, and Samantha Kelly, who was listening in a little while ago, she did tweet that she just signed up for Zealous to do the free trial. She does audio over on LinkedIn. She's really big with LinkedIn audio. So she had DM'd me, wanted me to ask you if it works on LinkedIn audio. I imagine it does, because if she can download the file, which I don't know, can you do that at LinkedIn? Do they let you download a copy, or would you have to record yourself?
Yeah, you see, so LinkedIn has always been problematic because they haven't had really great API support. I believe they do give you access to it. I haven't done LinkedIn audio in a while, so I normally did it I think we did it together when I beta tested it a long time ago. So I'm not sure if you can download, but yeah, if you can download a file, if you can give us a file, it'll work with Zealous.
Right. Which is what I love about Zealous, that I could take any audio file and put it into there, upload it into that, and still use all the different features. So with a new podcast coming out, that is like really important to me, in addition to all the different spaces. But I'll let her know about that, because yeah, as long as you have access to an audio file, then you can upload it into Zealous. So.
And we do diarize, so we will identify different speakers in the audio. And one of the tricks Zealous does have is when you go to label that speaker, you can use their Twitter handle, and it'll pre-populate like their avatar, their name automatically for you as well.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing so much with us today.
You bet. Thank you so much.
And I've got a very, very quick addition to the news, in that and only because we've been following this one along for quite a while as well. But today they announced at Podcast Movement, YouTube are going to be fully supporting the ingestion of RSS feeds for podcasts by the end of the year. We have some YouTube news, people. It has been stagnant and static for so long. I wondered if they'd just given up on it, to be honest. But yeah, it seems that they've chosen Podcast Movement, unsurprisingly, to announce that. So yeah, YouTube will be taking RSS feeds for podcasts by the end of the year. So very excited about that one. We can delve into that more next week.
Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us, and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.